I still keep the porch light on, not because it helps, it doesn't, I've checked, but because the one night I forgot, something used the dark. That's the part I can't explain to people without watching their face change. So I've stopped trying. I just leave the light on, and I let them think I'm afraid of burglars. It started with the recycling. We had one of those council schemes where you put the blue bin out every second Thursday, and I was the kind of person who got it wrong constantly, so I'd set a reminder on my phone. That Thursday the reminder went off and I went out around 11:30 at night, slippers on, the usual, and the bin was already at the curb, already out. I stood there for a second feeling stupid, thinking I must have done it earlier and forgotten, because that's the rational thing, isn't it? You did it and forgot. People forget. Except I lived alone, and I hadn't. I want to be honest about how I reasoned through it, because looking back, the reasoning is the scary part, not the bin. I decided my neighbor Trevor must have done it. Trevor was retired, a bit lonely, the type who'd water your plants without asking. He'd done kind things before. So I built this whole little story where Trevor, being thoughtful, had noticed my bin wasn't out and rolled it down for me. It made me feel warm about him, actually. I went to bed grateful. The next morning I saw Trevor in his garden and I thanked him for the bin, and he looked at me. I remember the exact look, sort of polite confusion, the look you give someone speaking a language you don't know. And he said he hadn't touched my bin. He said he'd been at his daughter's in Leeds since Tuesday, only got back that morning. I laughed it off. I think I said something like, "Oh, must have done it myself then, going mad." And we both chuckled, and that was that. But there was a small cold thing sitting in my chest for the rest of the day, and I couldn't name it, so I ignored it. Here's a detail I didn't think about until much later. When I'd gone out at 11:30, the bin wasn't just at the curb, it was positioned. Lid facing the road, handle turned in, the way the bin men actually preferred it. There were little laminated signs on the lampposts about it. I never put it out like that. I just dumped it on the pavement at an angle. Somebody who put my bin out knew how the bin men wanted it. That's a thing you only know if you've watched the street on collection day. I changed nothing about my routine, because what would I change? You can't restructure your life around a bin. But I started noticing things, and once you start noticing, you can't stop, and that's its own kind of trap. The thing about noticing is you don't know which things matter, so all of them start to. The shoes by the back door, for instance. I kept my wellies by the back door, and I kept them tucked under the little bench so they wouldn't trip me. And a few times, not every day, just some days, they'd be out from under the bench, side by side, pointing away from the door, like someone had stepped out of them. I told myself I kicked them, I bumped them with the mop, the cat. I didn't have a cat, but that's how desperate I got. I genuinely thought the cat, before remembering I didn't own one. That's when I knew I was further into something than I wanted to admit. You don't invent a pet to explain a noise unless part of you already knows the real explanation is worse. I started checking the locks twice, then 3 times. I'd check the back door, walk to the front, check that, walk back, and by the time I reached the back door again, I no longer trusted the memory of having checked it, so I'd check again. My partner had moved out 8 months before, and I'd been glad of the quiet. Now the quiet had a texture to it. You can hear a house settling, the pipes, the boiler ticking as it cools. I learned all of those sounds so well that I could feel it instantly when there was one that didn't belong. A soft sound, a weight on floorboard sound, from the spare room, at a time when I was sitting completely still in the kitchen. I told myself it was the boiler. The night I forgot the porch light, I'd come home late from a work thing, a leaving do for someone I didn't even like, and I was tired and a bit drunk, and I just went straight up to bed. Didn't do my rounds, didn't check anything. And at some point in the night I woke up because I was cold, properly cold, and I realized the cold was coming from the landing, and the landing was cold because the loft hatch was open. The loft hatch that I never opened, that I'd never once opened in 3 years of living there because I had no ladder and nothing to store. It was hanging down, the little folding ladder extended, and there was a smell coming down from up there. Not a bad smell, a lived-in smell, like a coat that's been worn. I didn't go up. I want to be clear that I am not the person who goes up. I went downstairs and I sat in the kitchen with the back door open and my keys in my hand until it got light, and then I called a locksmith and a friend, in that order, and I never slept in that house again. I had the locks changed and I stayed at my friend's and I gave notice on the place within the week. The locksmith found something when he was up there. He came down quieter than he went up. He said, and he was trying to be gentle about it, that there was a sort of nest, a sleeping bag, some food wrappers, a few bottles, and a torch. And the wrappers, he said, weren't old. The really specific thing, the thing I think about at 3 in the morning, is that he found a phone charger plugged into the light fitting up there. My phone charger, the one I'd been blaming myself for misplacing for 2 months. He'd been charging his phone off my loft light, in my house, while I checked my locks twice a night and invented a cat. The porch light stays on now. It doesn't help, but it makes me feel like I can see the edges of things. And the thing I can never get back, the thing that's actually gone forever, is the feeling that an empty house is empty. I don't believe in empty houses anymore. I believe in houses where you haven't found them yet. The second one I heard from a woman I'll call Priya, because she asked me not to use her name, and because the way she told it has stuck with me more than my own. She's an analyst, properly logical, the kind who'll correct your statistics at dinner, and she told the whole thing in this flat, careful voice, like she was presenting findings she didn't want to be true. She did night shifts monitoring servers for a hospital trust. Boring work, mostly. You sit in a windowless room with about 9 screens, and you wait for something to go red, and almost nothing ever goes red. She liked it. She liked being the only one awake who knew the building was breathing properly. Her words. The building had a camera system, obviously. Hospitals are wall-to-wall cameras, and part of her job, on the quiet nights, was that she had access to the feeds, not to watch them exactly, but they were there, on one of the 9 screens, cycling through corridors and car parks and fire exits on a loop. Background wallpaper. You stop seeing it the way you stop hearing a fridge. She started seeing it again because of the man in the brown coat. He appeared on the feed for the lower corridor, the one near the old mortuary that they didn't use anymore, walking slowly with his back to the camera. 3 in the morning. She noticed him the way you notice anything out of place at 3 in the morning, which is to say she noticed and then immediately rationalized. Porter, cleaner, lost relative. Hospitals have people in them at all hours. It's the one place in the world where a stranger at 3 a.m. isn't strange. She watched him walk out of frame, into the next camera's range, and she waited for him to appear on that next feed. He didn't. Now, she said, there's a perfectly good explanation for that. There were doors. There were side rooms. He could have gone anywhere. She actually said to me, most people would have stopped thinking about it there, and most people would have been right to. But she was an analyst, and the thing about her brain is it doesn't like a gap in a sequence. So she did something she said she still doesn't fully understand. She pulled the footage back, rewound it, watched him again, and on the rewind, she saw the thing she'd missed the first time, because the first time she'd been watching him and not the corridor. The corridor had a row of windows along one side, the kind with the wired safety glass, and on the other side of those windows was the night, black. And as he walked, in the glass, you could see the reflection of the corridor behind him, the empty corridor, and in the reflection, there was a second figure, walking just behind him, keeping pace, that wasn't there in the corridor itself. She paused it. She zoomed in as far as the system would let her, which wasn't far. Everything went to soup, but she could see it. 2 people in the reflection, 1 person in the room. She told me she sat there for a long time doing the only thing she knew how to do, which was look for the error. Camera glitch, compression artifact, a double exposure thing, a ghost frame from the buffer. She knew the technical reasons a reflection might lie. She listed them all to me, and honestly some of them sounded plausible, and I could see her wanting them to be true even as she said them. What broke it for her was the timestamp. She decided she'd report it in the morning as a possible camera fault. That was the professional thing. Log it, move on. So she went to note the exact time, and she looked at the clock on the feed, the little white numbers in the corner, and they were running, counting up, second by second, like a stopwatch, from 00, not the time of day, just a count, climbing, on every feed. All 9 of them, suddenly, the same climbing number. And she said the worst part, the part that made her stand up out of her chair, was that the number on her own screen, the dead screen, the one that should have just shown her desktop, was climbing too. Something was timing how long she'd been watching. She left. She walked out of the windowless room and down the corridor toward the exit, and she had to pass the lower corridor to get there, the real one, not the feed. And she said the lights were off in it, which they shouldn't have been, and she did not look down it. She has a very specific way of describing this. She said, "I made a decision not to acquire information that I could not act on." That's an analyst telling you she ran. She quit, filed it under stress, told everyone she was burned out, and in a way that was true. But months later she got curious. In that way she can't switch off, and she found someone who still worked there, and she asked, casually, about the camera in the lower corridor. And the colleague said there wasn't one. There never had been. That corridor had been decommissioned years before she started, sealed at both ends, no power, no cameras, nothing. It wasn't on the system. She'd been watching a feed from a camera that didn't exist, of a corridor nobody could enter, where one man walked and his reflection brought a friend. The thing she said to me at the end, I'll never forget it, because of how calm she was. She said, "I'm comfortable with not knowing what it was. What I'm not comfortable with is that it was counting. You don't count something unless you're going to act when the number gets high enough." And then she asked me to change the subject, and we did. The last one is shorter, and it's the one I believe the most, maybe because there's nothing supernatural in it at all, and that's somehow worse. It's just a thing a man did. The narrator is a guy called Sam, younger, the type who films everything, lives half his life through his phone, and I think that's the only reason he's still able to tell it, because he had a record. He'd just moved into a flat, third one up in a converted house, and he was doing the thing everyone does now, filming a little tour for his social media. Empty flat, echoing, "Here's the kitchen, here's the bathroom, ignore the mess." He posted it, got a few likes, forgot about it. About a week in, he started to feel like the layout of his stuff was slightly wrong. Not dramatically, just he'd leave a glass on the left of the sink and find it on the right. His phone charger, that universal detail, would be unplugged when he was sure he'd left it charging. The kind of thing where you think, did I must have. He was tired. New job, new place. You don't trust yourself in a new place. He told himself he was just disoriented. The thing that changed it was the heating. The radiator in his bedroom would be warm in the morning, even on days he hadn't put the heating on, and only that radiator, only that room. He's practical, Sam, so he thought. Faulty valve, landlord's problem. And he texted the landlord. The landlord said the heating in the building was on a single timer, and if one radiator was warm, they'd all be warm. They weren't. Just his bedroom, just overnight. He set his phone up to film the room while he was at work. Not because he was scared. He genuinely thought he'd catch a plumbing fault, a leak, something he could show the landlord. Propped it on the shelf, Hit record, went to work. 9 hours of footage. He scrubbed through it that evening on his sofa, fast, bored, expecting nothing. At 2 hours and roughly 10 minutes in, the wardrobe opened. Not violently. It just swung open, slowly, from the inside, and a man climbed out. Calmly, like a person getting out of bed. He was older, ordinary looking, the most ordinary man you've ever seen, and he stretched, and he walked out of frame toward the kitchen, and 20 minutes later he walked back and got into the wardrobe and pulled it shut behind him. And the timestamp showed this was a thing with a rhythm to it. Sam went back through earlier footage he'd taken for other reasons, old videos on his phone, and the man was in those too. Edges of them, a shape behind a door, a reflection. The wardrobe never quite shut. He'd been living in the wardrobe, in the wall behind it really. There was a void, an old chimney breast. You could get into it from the loft and down. He'd been there since before Sam moved in. He'd watched the flat tour video. He knew Sam's schedule because Sam posted his schedule. Gym in the morning, work till 6, the whole pattern, narrated cheerfully to a few hundred strangers, one of whom was already inside. The police took it seriously, took the footage, found the void, found the man's things. What they couldn't tell Sam, what nobody could tell him, was how long the man had done this before, in that flat, with whoever lived there before Sam, who'd moved out suddenly, they said, just left one day. Sam asked what happened to them. The officer said they didn't know. They'd never been able to find them to ask. Sam doesn't film his flat anymore. He doesn't film anything. And he told me the detail that ended it for me, the one I take home with me, is that on the footage, the very first time the man climbs out of the wardrobe, before he stretches, before anything, he looks directly at the phone, at the camera Sam had hidden. He'd known it was there the whole time. He just didn't care, because he knew Sam wouldn't watch it until that night, and by then the man would have heard him come home and be back in the wall, listening to him scrub through the footage on the sofa, getting to the part where the wardrobe opens, and feeling the temperature of the room change as he understood. So, 3 stories, and I know what the rational part of you is doing right now, because I'd be doing it too. You're filing them under made up, because the alternative makes the room you're sitting in feel different. That's fine. That's healthy, even. But before you go to sleep tonight, you're going to check something. A lock, a window, a cupboard. You won't even decide to do it. Your hand will just do it on the way past. And when you find nothing, you'll feel silly, and you'll go to bed. It's the night you don't check that I'd think about. And the thing about a wardrobe, a loft, a sealed corridor, is that it's empty right up until the exact moment you learn it isn't. You just haven't found them yet.